On October 2nd, 1992, in just 30 minutes, Brazilian military police transformed what was supposed to be a routine prison disturbance into the deadliest prison massacre in modern history. 111 inmates were executed, many shot while naked, surrendering, or hiding in their cells. But the most disturbing part isn't the massacre itself. It was what motivated the massacre.
O que aconteceu era a véspera de eleição e a polícia militar que estava ali recebeu ordens para entrar e dominar a qualquer preço. E o preço foi esse.
And the political reason behind the release of the said officers will leave you questioning everything about justice in Brazil. This is the true story of the Carandiru prison. The Casa de Detenção de São Paulo, known as Carandiru Prison, was supposed to be Brazil's shining example of humane incarceration. Instead, by 1992, it had become a nightmare. Latin America's largest prison complex housing over 8,000 inmates in space designed for 3,250. Cells designed for one person were crammed with 8 to 10 inmates, broken toilets without partitions, sewage flooding the corridors, disease running rampant. By the 1990s, HIV rates reached 17.3% among the prison population, with some vulnerable groups showing infection rates as high as 78%.
Então, da minha cela lá, nós conseguíamos ver o metrôzão, né? O metrô passava, a gente falava, eita, nós, será que ela tá ali no metrô? Aquela lembrança, né? E aí é o seguinte, todo mundo ficou esperando, os caras não vinham, aí a gente começou a escutar os barulhos da tranca. Tranca é o quê? Os caras estavam trancando todas as celas nos outros pavilhões.
This wasn't just overcrowding. This was a powder keg waiting to explode. With only about 1,000 guards for 8,000 inmates, the prison had essentially become a lawless territory where inmates governed themselves through violence and fear. On that fateful Thursday morning, what started as a routine day turned deadly over something so trivial it's almost unbelievable.
Foi uma treta entre o Coelho e o Barba, você tá ligado? Dois caras. Quem é na fila do pão?
Ou era algum líder?
Não era Bonnie, não. Quem é o cara no pão, mano? Se tiveram uma treta por causa do que o cara tinha uma maconha, ele não queria vender, o outro pai discutiram, aí um deu facada, outro deu paulada, o preso veio, separou a treta.
But here's what nobody talks about. What happened next was not a riot. It was barely even a disturbance.
A realidade, o que aconteceu naquele dia? Naquele dia aconteceu uma confusão entre dois presos. Mas nós estamos falando de um presídio que morria 3, 4 por dia. O que é uma confusão entre dois presos?
Houve uma briga no mesmo pavilhão, no segundo andar. E essa briga veio causar esse transtorno deselegante a qual os funcionários saíram.
You heard that right. The prison guards lied. They abandoned their posts, locked the pavilion, and then claimed there was a full-scale rebellion when there wasn't one.
Acabou a treta, caralho. Acabou, mano. Acabou a treta, chapa.
Survivors describe how inmates were actually trying to avoid confrontation because the next day was visiting day, the most important day of the week for prisoners to see their families.
Era dia de faxina, sábado era dia de visita, mano. Se era dia de visita, nós tá louco pra nossa visitinha chegar.
Quanto tempo era a visita?
So if there was no riot, if the fight was over, and if the inmates were actually trying to keep things calm, why did what happened next occur? What happened next wasn't crowd control. It wasn't riot suppression. What happened next was a deliberate massacre orchestrated by Brazil's most elite and controversial police unit.
Aí, mano, estamos falando da rota de 1992, certo, mano? Que era um batalhão de elite. Certo, mano? Um batalhão que é o seguinte, mano. Os caras, você tá ligado? Passar o cerol. Inclusive, existe o documentário do Caco Barcelo, certo? Que eles estavam sendo acusados do quê?
Rota, the Rondas Ostensivas Tobias de Aguiar, Brazil's elite tactical police unit that had been accused of operating as an extermination squad. These weren't regular police officers responding to an emergency. These were Brazil's most lethal operatives, and they were about to turn Pavilion 9 into a killing field. You see, that particular Friday, Brazil was on the eve of municipal elections. Politicians needed to look tough on crime.
O que aconteceu era a véspera de eleição e a polícia militar que estava ali recebeu ordens para entrar e dominar a qualquer preço. E o preço foi esse.
The order came from the very top: dominate the prison at any cost. What's about to unfold in the next part of this story will show you exactly how 341 heavily armed police officers fired over 3,500 bullets in just 30 minutes, how most prisoners were shot in the back while surrendering, and how the authorities tried to cover up one of the most shameful episodes in modern law enforcement history. But first, you need to understand just how systematic and brutal this execution really was.
E começou a encher de polícia. Aí nós olhamos e falamos, mas nunca veio polícia aqui.
Jura
mano.
que já foi desse nível?
Gael, começou a encher de polícia.
O diretor-geral substituto da Casa de Detenção naquele dia também prestou depoimento e disse que os policiais da rota entraram no pavilhão atirando nos detentos sem que houvesse uma ordem superior.
Survivors describe watching in disbelief as 341 military police officers surrounded the prison complex. This wasn't a standard response team. This was an army. The operation was led by Colonel Ubiratan Gumares, commanding officers from 3 elite units. Rota, Rondas Ostensivas Tobias de Aguiar. COE, Comando de Operacos Especiais. And GATE, Grupo de Acoas Táticas Especiais. These weren't ordinary police. They were Brazil's most lethal tactical forces, trained for maximum lethality. They claimed that after a failed negotiation with the prisoners, the police command decided to enter the force with machine guns, rifles, and pistols. But survivors tell a completely different story. There was no failed negotiation. There was barely any negotiation at all.
Então a polícia tá ali, e aí vocês falam, a gente não vai, não sei o quê, e taca a privada. Na hora que taca a privada, é o que motiva a galera a falar, agora a gente vai atacar. Isso
Mentira.
não aconteceu.
Não aconteceu nada disso aí. Não.
Eles entraram direto.
Não, os caras entrou direto.
The truth is horrifying. The police didn't negotiate. They didn't give ultimatums. They simply stormed the building and started shooting.
Pode ter até entrado, mas isso aí foi um segundo momento. Os caras entrou lá por trás, você tá ligado, do pavilhão 2, passaram pelo pavilhão 8, vieram, você tá ligado, pelo canto do muro, tudo no cantinho, e entraram pro pavilhão 9. Eles queriam entrar no pavilhão 8, o diretor não deixou.
What happened next was systematic slaughter, floor by floor, cell by cell.
E aí o indivíduo falou, não, os caras estão entrando e atirando. Eu falei, não, meu, matando assim não. Os caras estão dando tiro de bala de borracha, igual faz comitê de greve de metalúrgico, de universitário. Os caras falaram, não, negão, os caras estão assassinando. Meu.
The death toll tells the horrifying story. 15 inmates killed on the first floor, 78 on the second floor, 8 on the third floor, and 10 on the fourth floor. This wasn't random violence. This was a methodical clearing operation.
Quem foi o primeiro a morrer? Quem foi a galera primeiro a morrer? Por quê?
O pessoal do segundo andar. O pessoal que estava embaixo no pátio, segundo andar, porque eles subiram, você tá ligado, de andar em andar. Então eles subiram pro segundo, terceiro, quarto e foi indo, né?
E eles atiravam nos caras dentro da cela.
But here's the detail that will make your blood run cold. These weren't armed prisoners fighting back.
Um policial grita da porta se tinha alguém lá dentro, nós ficamos com medo de responder, ele colocar a metralhadora e executar todo mundo.
These were men cowering in their cells, begging for their lives. The forensic evidence reveals the true horror of what happened. 515 bullets were recovered from the bodies of the victims, an average of nearly 5 bullets per person killed. But the pattern of these wounds tells an even more disturbing story. Forensic reports showed that many victims were shot multiple times at close range, often while in defensive positions or while naked to show they were unarmed. Bullet holes in cell walls were found approximately 50 centimeters above the ground, indicating that victims were shot while kneeling or lying down in surrender positions.
Lá nessa hora eu dei brado falando, tem, meu senhor? Ele chutou a porta, entrou em arma em punho com mais os 2 policiais, mandando que tirasse a roupa e saísse todos nus pra fora. E aí descemos diversas escadas, chegava no térreo, tinha que ficar com a cabeça entre as pernas, com a mão sobre a cabeça.
The prisoners were forced to strip naked to prove they had no weapons, then executed anyway. This wasn't combat. This was cold-blooded murder.
Atirando. Aí eles perguntaram, quem é que está cansado? Aqueles que levantaram a mão, que eu acredito que sejam uns 30 ou 40, foram mortos.
The police asked who was tired, and when prisoners raised their hands, thinking they might get rest or medical attention, they were immediately executed. But here's what makes this incident even more infuriating. There's evidence that some guards tried to prevent the massacre from spreading.
Então, que separava o 9 do 8, a PM várias vezes quis entrar. E eles argumentavam, se os senhores vão entrar aqui, por quê? Tá tudo calmo aqui, não tem nenhuma necessidade. Mas esses homens impediram que essa tragédia fosse multiplicada por, sei lá, quantas vezes os 111 que faleceram no pavilhão 9.
In Pavilion 8, experienced prison guards managed to convince both prisoners and police that there was no threat, no riot, no need for violence. They saved potentially hundreds of lives by keeping the massacre contained to just one pavilion.
E assim fizeram eles. Fizeram depois nos andares de baixo e ficaram todos os presos trancados. E as chaves das celas com a faixinha.
This proves beyond doubt that what happened in Pavilion 9 was not necessary. It was not unavoidable. It was a choice.
Estava dentro de helicóptero retornando para São Paulo de Sorocaba.
Ele é a única pessoa
que pode dizer por que a ordem foi tão assim pontual.
The reference here is to the governor who was in a helicopter at the time, the only person who could have given or stopped such a punctual order for mass execution. But the most damning evidence comes from the ballistics. No police officers were killed or seriously injured by gunfire during the operation, completely contradicting official claims of a firefight. This was a one-sided slaughter.
No andar, eu estava escutando um monte de tiro, estava escutando um monte de grito, porém eu não conseguia entender que as pessoas estavam sendo assassinadas. Pra mim, os caras estavam quebrando o braço, quebrando perna, você tá ligado? Tirando pra cima, é.
Even survivors initially couldn't comprehend the scale of the killing happening just floors below them. The aftermath was a scene from hell.
Foi justamente quando eu fui um dos escolhidos a ajudar a carregar alguns cadáveres.
Surviving prisoners were forced to carry the bodies of their dead cellmates, a final act of psychological torture by the perpetrators.
Eu olhei aquela cachoeira descendo e falei, inacreditável, parece filme de terror.
But the horror didn't end with the shooting. What happened next was a systematic cover-up that would deny justice for decades. After 111 men were executed in cold blood, what followed was not justice. It was a systematic cover-up that protected the perpetrators and denied closure to victims' families for over 3 decades. The cover-up began immediately after the shooting stopped. Police allegedly washed blood from crime scenes, prohibited independent photography, and altered reports to claim initial police casualties that were later retracted. Evidence was deliberately destroyed to prevent accountability, but here's what's absolutely infuriating. The man who ordered this massacre not only walked free, he became a politician. Colonel Ubiratan Guimares, the commander of the operation, was initially sentenced in 2001 to 632 years in prison for 102 homicides, the longest sentence in Brazilian history at the time. But did he serve even one day? No. Instead, while his appeal was pending, he ran for office and won, becoming a state deputy in 2002. His campaign number? 14111, a sick reference to the 111 people he had killed. This gave him legislative immunity, protecting him from prosecution. Then in 2006, his conviction was overturned on appeal. The court accepted his just following orders defense, the same excuse rejected by international law since the Nuremberg trials.
Em 2001, ele chegou a ser condenado a 632 anos de prisão pela morte dos 111 detentos, mas nunca foi preso. A defesa recorreu da sentença e em 2006 ele foi absolvido. Poucos meses depois, o coronel foi assassinado dentro de seu apartamento. De acordo com a...
Just months after his acquittal, Guimarães was assassinated in his apartment, likely by the very criminal organization that his massacre had helped create. Because here's the most chilling consequence of the Carandiru massacre. It gave birth to Brazil's most dangerous criminal organization.
Por causa do massacre do Carandiru que surgiu o PCC. Não sou eu que estou dizendo. O PCC tem 2 artigos quando eles colocam as intenções dele, a justificativa para ter surgido. Quais são eles? Primeiro, livrar os presos da repressão do Estado. Esse é o primeiro estatuto do PCC. E o segundo, vingar os 111 que morreram.
The Primeiro Comando da Capital, PCC, First Capital Command, was formed in 1993 at Taubaté prison by 8 inmates, including survivors and others motivated by the Carandiru massacre. Their founding charter explicitly states their purpose: to free prisoners from state oppression and to avenge the 111 who died at Carandiru.
This is Marcos William Herbas Camosha, better known as Marcola. He's one of the most powerful prisoners in the world. For nearly 2 decades, Marcola has led Brazil's most ruthless and notorious gang, the PCC.
The PCC is responsible for some of the most violent terror attacks that Brazil has ever seen.
Based in Sao Paulo and with over 30,000 members, this violent organization have massacred police, murdered judges, and shut down entire cities. They control 60% of Brazil's cocaine market and are responsible for the biggest bank robberies in the country's history.
Today, the PCC has grown into one of South America's most powerful criminal organizations with over 30,000 members, controlling 60% of Brazil's cocaine trade and operating across multiple countries.
The PCC has personnel files on all 35,000 members, and it's got, Excel spreadsheets for all of its financial dealings. It's got all these internal rules and regulations.
O PCC veio com bastante violência também. Eles faziam, a primeira vez que eu vi um corpo desse, ele tinha um corte que vinha aqui atrás da região occipital e corria pelo pescoço. Eu, quando vi, falei para o funcionário que estava comigo, fora as outras facadas, né? Falei, pô, isso aí Isso é uma maldade, isso foi feito depois. Não dá para fazer uma coisa dessa com a pessoa correndo, tentando se defender. Ele disse, não, isso aí é a marca do PCC.
The PCC's signature became a cut from the back of the neck to the throat, a mark left on victims to show who had killed them. The organization that claimed to protect prisoners had become more violent than the state they opposed. But their most terrifying demonstration of power came in 2006, when authorities tried to transfer PCC leaders to different prisons.
The streets were deserted, buses were bombed, and state buildings were attacked. Hundreds were killed in the fighting.
Known as the attacks of May, where the city was shut down for basically 4 days.
The PCC launched 293 coordinated attacks across Sao Paulo, bombing buses, attacking police stations, and paralyzing Brazil's largest city for 4 days. Over 150 people died in the violence. For Sao Paulo residents, the 2006 attacks were their 9/11ths, a traumatic demonstration that criminal organizations now had the power to shut down entire cities.
As consequências foram de que o Estado perdeu o controle das cadeias. O controle hoje é um controle muito mais restrito e muito menos abrangente do que o que era no passado. E o crime organizado tomou conta das ruas e hoje o Brasil tem uma facção que domina o estado de São Paulo e outros estados.
The Carandiru massacre didn't just kill 111 people, it fundamentally changed Brazil's criminal landscape forever. Meanwhile, justice for the massacre remained elusive. Between 2013 and 2014, 74 police officers were finally convicted in multiple trials, receiving sentences ranging from 48 to 624 years each. Finally, it seemed justice might be served. But in 2016, the Sao Paulo Court of Justice made a decision that outraged human rights organizations worldwide.
A defesa dos réus entrou com recurso e até hoje nenhum policial chegou a ser preso. E no ano passado, todos os 5 julgamentos foram anulados pelo Tribunal de Justiça de São Paulo.
All convictions were nullified on the grounds of self-defense and insufficient evidence, despite overwhelming forensic evidence of executions. Amnesty International called it a shocking blow for justice.
A maioria dos acusados de serem responsáveis pelo massacre não foram responsabilizados. Grande parte deles continuou a atuar na polícia até a aposentadoria e um terço deles ainda está ativo na PM.
The legal battle continued through higher courts, with convictions being reinstated and appealed multiple times. But through it all, not one officer has served prison time for the massacre. Then, in December 2022, outgoing President Jair Bolsonaro made a move that enraged human rights advocates. Article 6 of the decree signed by President Jair Bolsonaro releases all military police officers convicted for the Carandiru massacre that occurred on October 2nd, 1992. Bolsonaro issued a Christmas pardon for all police involved in the massacre, arguing that such killings weren't considered illegal in 1992. The pardon was quickly suspended by Brazil's Supreme Court as unconstitutional, but the message was clear: impunity still reigned.
Claramente foi indulto encomendado para garantir a impunidade dos responsáveis pelo massacre do Carandiru.
Today, over 30 years later, the consequences of the Carandiru massacre continue to reverberate through Brazilian society. The prison itself was demolished in 2002 and transformed into Parque da Juventude, a public space with libraries, schools, and recreational areas. A small museum remains to preserve the memory of what happened there, but the transformation of the site into a park hasn't erased the devastating impact of what happened there. Brazil's prison population has exploded from 233,000 in 2000 to over 800,000 today, with facilities operating at 200% capacity. Similar conditions that led to the Carandiru massacre persist throughout the system. Recent prison massacres continue to shock the world. In 2017, 56 inmates were killed in Manaus, many decapitated, as rival gangs fought for control. In 2019, another 55 died in Amazonas prisons during gang warfare. The cycle of violence that began with the Carandiru massacre shows no signs of stopping.
O máximo que está acontecendo é famílias que esperaram 20 anos para ser indenizada e um julgamento que acontece agora e que no qual são envolvidos, na maior parte dos casos, apenas as pessoas que foram e executaram a ordem. Não está mais em questão quem determinou a ordem.
Even today, only 25 of 154 relatives from 75 victims have received compensation after waiting an average of 22.5 years. The families continue to fight for justice justice that may never come. The story of Carandiru isn't just about one terrible day in 1992. It's about how a moment of state violence can echo through decades, creating cycles of revenge, criminal organizations, and ongoing injustice that continue to plague Brazilian society.
Tem muita gente que diz, bom, é tudo bandido, bandido bom é bandido morto. Gente, nós temos que pensar nessas coisas, que essas coisas têm consequências.
The consequences were catastrophic. Brazil lost control of its prisons. Organized crime took over the streets. The PCC became one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the world, with operations spanning multiple countries and controlling billions of dollars in drug trafficking. And through it all, not one person has been held accountable for ordering the systematic execution of 111 human beings in 30 minutes. This is the true story of Carandiru, not just a prison massacre, but the birth of modern organized crime in Brazil, born from the ashes of state violence and nurtured by decades of impunity. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.